On September 25, 1933, Paul Ehrenfest entered the waiting room of the Institute in Amsterdam, where his son Vasek, who had Down syndrome, was being cared for. He ended his own son's life, then took his own. It was an unfathomable act that overshadowed a remarkable life. Ehrenfest was an extraordinarily gifted physicist and a good friend of Einstein. Einstein called him the best teacher in our profession whom I have ever known. Yet Ehrenfest struggled with self-doubt and depression his entire life.
This is the story of the most tragic scientist in history.
Paul Ehrenfest was the son of a poor Jewish weaver from Moravia, now part of the Czech Republic, who married and moved to Vienna and later became a successful grocer. It was in Vienna where Paul was born on January 18, 1880. He was the youngest of 5 boys. His older brothers shaped his education more than his early schooling ever could. He had an unhappy childhood. His mother died of breast cancer when he was 10. His father followed when he was 16 after suffering from stomach ulcers. The only happiness in his life was a love of math and physics, particularly attending Ludwig Boltzmann's physics lectures. Ehrenfest began his studies in chemistry at the Technical University of Vienna, but moved to Göttingen in Germany in search of a richer scientific scene, where he immersed himself in mathematics and physics. In Göttingen, he met Russian math student Tatyana Afanasyeeva. He wondered why she didn't come to the mathematics club meetings, and then discovered that women weren't allowed to attend, so he fought and succeeded in changing the rules. When Tatyana followed Paul to Vienna, he was completing his doctorate under Boltzmann. They wanted to marry, but Paul was Jewish and Tatyana Russian Orthodox, and Austro-Hungarian law forbade mixed marriages, so they both renounced their religion and married in 1904. 2 years later, Boltzmann took his own life. He had been plagued by depression, asthma, and a crippling fear of lecturing. Ehrenfest was devastated. To honor his legacy, he dedicated himself to simplifying and visualizing Boltzmann's abstract ideas in statistical mechanics, collaborating with his wife on what became the famous Ehrenfest model of diffusion. Imagine 2 containers holding a total of 100 balls. At each step, you randomly pick one ball and move it to the other container. The balls shuffle back and forth, and over time they tend to cluster around an even split, about 50 in each box. Sometimes you'll see fluctuations like 60-40 or 70-30, but the system almost always drifts back toward balance. It's a simple but powerful way to show how random motion drives systems toward equilibrium, the same principle behind gases mixing or heat spreading through a room. He developed his model living in St. Petersburg, then the capital of the Russian Empire, fulfilling a promise to his wife to make a home in her country. Ehrenfest immersed himself in research problems. Another example of his groundbreaking work was his paradox. Imagine a disk spinning close to the speed of light. Each piece of the rim is moving along its length, so special relativity predicts the circumference should contract, but the radius points outward, perpendicular to the motion, so it stays the same. The result is a paradox. The circle no longer follows the familiar rule that the circumference equals 2 pi times the radius. If the disk were made of real material, it couldn't remain perfectly rigid, as internal stresses would cause it to deform or even break apart. The paradox was a hint that geometry itself changes, that space in a rotating system isn't flat, but curved, a clue that pointed directly to Einstein's general theory of relativity.
And yet, despite his talents, Ehrenfest couldn't find stable work.
He was a foreigner, a Jew, and officially registered in papers as without religion. By now, he and Tatyana had 2 daughters, and he had imagined settling in Russia for good. But the insecurity weighed on him. He wrote in his diary in 1911, "We must move away. I still have found no home." His fortunes changed when he traveled through Europe on a lecture tour at German-speaking universities in 1912. In Berlin, he visited Max Planck. In Leipzig, he reconnected with his old friend Gustav Herglotz. In Munich, he met Arnold Zumfeld. His journey then took him to Zurich, Vienna, and finally Prague, where he met Einstein for the first time. They hit it off immediately. Einstein remembered, "Within a few hours we were true friends, as though our dreams and aspirations were meant for each other." Beyond their personal bond, Einstein admired Ehrenfest's intellect. That respect gave Ehrenfest confidence at a time when he felt overlooked. Einstein even proposed Ehrenfest as his successor in Prague, but he declined. The post required a formal religious affiliation, something he had renounced.
But it didn't matter because another opportunity was on the horizon.
In April 1912, Hendrik Lorentz began searching for someone to succeed him in his theoretical physics chair at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Zumfeld championed Ehrenfest, praising him. He lectures like a master. He knows how to make the most difficult things concrete and intuitively clear. 5 months later, in September, the news finally arrived by telegram. Ehrenfest named professor at Leiden. Sincere congratulations, Lorenz. Ehrenfest was overwhelmed. He wrote back with deep gratitude. I will really exert all my strength in order to justify the confidence of those men who found it possible to appoint me to your professorial chair. The Ehrenfests lived simply in their newly built home in Leiden, cooking vegetarian meals and abstaining from alcohol and smoking. Though the food may have been plain, the conversations were rich. Their home became a gathering place for Europe's greatest scientific minds. Einstein visited often when he was appointed extraordinary professor at Leiden. They played music together, with Einstein nudging Ehrenfest away from Beethoven and onto Bach. Einstein admired his unique gift for teaching, later reflecting, "He was not merely the best teacher in our profession whom I have ever known. He was also passionately preoccupied with the development and destiny of men, especially his students."
While applauded as a teacher above all else, Ehrenfest also produced work that left a lasting impact on physics.
One of his most important ideas was published in 1914 on Adiabatic Invariants. Imagine a pendulum swinging back and forth. If you shorten its string very, very slowly, the pendulum keeps swinging smoothly, never jerking out of rhythm. But its frequency, how often it swings, and its energy, how high and fast it swings, adjust to keep the ratio of energy to frequency the same. That unchanging ratio is what Ehrenfest called an adiabatic invariant. This insight revealed which properties of a physical system, whether in atoms, oscillators, or radiation inside a cavity, stay unchanged when conditions evolve slowly. It became a foundation of the old quantum theory. During the war years, the Ehrenfest home in Leiden was full of energy and ideas. Paul and Tatyana chose to homeschool their children, believing that schools stifled curiosity and that learning should grow freely at home. They grew to a family of 4 children. Their youngest, Vasek, was born with Down syndrome, which weighed heavily on the family, and would later play a tragic role in Ehrenfest's life. By the 1920s, Paul Ehrenfest began to feel out of place. Physics was shifting away from the concrete visual reasoning he loved to something more abstract. He struggled to keep up with the rapid developments of the younger generation, including Werner Heisenberg, Erwin Schrödinger, Wolfgang Pauli, and Paul Dirac, whose bold new ideas in quantum mechanics were transforming the field.
Yet, despite feeling inadequate, he published what many regard as his most significant scientific contribution.
Ehrenfest connected the strange world of quantum mechanics to the familiar laws of classical physics. Quantum particles, like electrons, behave in strange wave-like ways. They don't follow precise fixed paths like planets orbiting the sun. Instead, we can only predict the probabilities of finding them in different places. Ehrenfest's theorem showed that if you take the average of those probabilities over time, those averages obey the same rules Isaac Newton laid out centuries earlier. Although individual quantum particles behave unpredictably, their average motion still reflects Newton's laws, a breakthrough linking the quantum world to the familiar laws of motion we see every day. However, his feeling of inadequacy persisted, exacerbated by the strain of the Great Depression. He was convinced he'd be let go from Leiden. He once wrote to his students, "My boys, I know absolutely nothing." In his depression, he began an affair with a young art critic named Nellie. Once his wife learned of his affair, she asked for a divorce, plunging him into an even deeper despair. Einstein became so worried about his state of mind that he sent a note to the board of Leiden University requesting that his workload be reduced. But his friend couldn't do anything for him. The darkness in Ehrenfest seemed to mirror the darkness spreading across Europe. When the Nazis rose to power in neighboring Germany, anti-Semitism intensified across the continent. His youngest son Vasek, who had Down syndrome, had been placed in an institution in Germany, but as the conditions grew dangerous, the family moved him to an institute in Amsterdam. It was here that Ehrenfest carried out his final, tragic act. He had been contemplating it for some time. In 1931, he wrote a letter to his friends Einstein, Bohr, and others. In recent years, it has become ever more difficult for me to follow the developments in physics with understanding. I have finally given up in desperation. This made me completely weary of life. I concentrate more and more on the precise details of taking his own life. Forgive me. He never sent the letter. It was found in his possession after his death. Today, Paul Ehrenfest is often overlooked, largely forgotten, even among physicists. But his biographer Martin Klein captured his significance this way. No man was more deeply engaged than he in the struggle to create the concepts of 20th century physics, and no man was more fully committed to maintaining clarity and intelligibility in the flood of new developments. His efforts recognized by the informal title his colleagues conferred upon him, the conscience of physics. Paul Ehrenfest's brilliance lay in making complex physics easy to understand, turning abstract ideas into something you could see and feel. And that's exactly what my sponsor Brilliant does. Brilliant helps you become a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of visual, interactive lessons in math, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. Instead of passively watching lectures, you actually play with the concepts, so you learn in the intuitive way Ehrenfest taught his students. If today's video sparked your interest in quantum physics, Brilliant's calculus and scientific thinking courses let you dive into these topics hands-on. Whatever your interests, there's something for you, from learning how to code to exploring data science courses that teach you to spot trends and make smarter decisions. One of my all-time favorites is Brilliant's logic courses that have helped me become a better thinker. You can try Brilliant completely free by visiting brilliant.org/newsthink or scanning the QR code on your screen. That's brilliant.org/newsthink. The link is in the description. And if you want unlimited access to all their lessons, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for watching. For Newsthink, I'm Cindy Pom.